In working with the black projects, I was picked because I was very strong mentally. I was involved in something very controversial in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. On the southwest part of the Archuleta Mesa, we built an underground facility, a better part of 3 cubic miles hollowed out underground. To our total surprise, first of all, the government knew all about it. They didn't tell anybody. When I saw Green Beret and Black Beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up. The gig was up. First of all, I knew all about the alien agenda. I'll explain that in a few minutes. The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. Had been one of their internal bases. And we'd drilled holes right on top of it. All the stinking air, all the black sooty air came right out as soon as the first hole was sunk, and all this soot came up. And well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really, all started. Anyway, after we drilled all 4 holes, it took about 2 days to drill all 4 of them. And when you build an underground base, you drill 4 basic holes, and then you build called stopes or cross-member holes across, and then you use blasting equipment, special blasting equipment by the analyzation of the rock formation, and you literally blast out or tunnel out or deflagrate or melt rock out to build the large rooms that are required for this underground base. Well, in this process, I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The person was the entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the sea spray and the yellow fruit and all the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walther PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. This is in late August of 1979. Now, you got a regular suit of clothes, you got a regular clothes on, plus you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it and start shooting. And I killed 2 of them. Yes, they're mortal, and they do die. However, in the process, one of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish. And burnt my fingers right off of me, and it was some form of electrical force because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me, completely crispy crittered my left foot, burnt the shoe right off of me. All I remember was the smoking remains, and I'm still conscious, but in and out of, I didn't remember much. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me that risked his life. In fact, he died. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. And I wouldn't be alive talking to you today if it wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat.
Acknowledge it was a homicide. Other than that, I'd like to also mention something about my father. My father was a U-boat captain in Hitler's Navy, and he got captured and taken over I didn't find this out until about 2 weeks before he died. On his deathbed, he kind of told everybody in total shock. I was one of them. In fact, I didn't believe him. I thought he was kind of in delirium or something like that. And of course, other things have come up since. And so, anyway, he was captured by the French, turned over to the Third Army, the U.S. Third Army, and then U.S. Third Army turned him over to the Navy. And he was a master machinist. Now, that's not a journeyman. A master means that they can take a block of metal and make a gun or a watch or some other fine instrument. And he was a master machinist. He later became an MD doctor and part of the aerospace medicine group of the United States Navy. Was instrumental in helping build the USS Nautilus.
Let me answer this I'll answer this in a couple of parts. First of all, the idea of underground bases and underground civilizations. This is a very old idea in human history. Going back even thousands of years, you've got ancient tribes around the world that have made these claims. We would say it's in their myths, but that there are secret caverns, secret races, secret tribes that exist underground. And really, when one talks about, for example, hollow earth theory, that's a lot of what we're talking about here. Not all hollow earth theorists say that the entire earth is hollow. A lot of them will say that there are just substantial caverns under the ground where there are civilizations that are down there. So that's an old idea. You get it in a lot of ancient European,
a small island nation in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. Further evidence of the use of advanced technology on Malta can be found underground. In 1902, construction workers, while building the foundation for several houses, accidentally discovered a mysterious underground sanctuary dating to 2500 BC. Called the Hypogeum, the subterranean structure was revealed to be 3 levels deep, all hewn from solid stone.
It's been estimated that they removed more than 2,000 tons of stone from these subterranean chambers to create a space that beautifully replicates the temples above ground.
Perhaps one of the greatest mysteries concerning the Hypogeum involve the acoustical properties in what is called the Oracle Room.
The acoustic properties within this are absolutely extraordinary, because what happens is that if a person is within the Oracle Room, the way that their voice is carried is heard within the whole of the complex.
The second part of my talk will be aliens and the alien agenda. I've already touched on that. Old alien bases. And like I said, Bikini Island, according to what was studied after the A-bomb blast, that some of the caves that were infested with out-of-place artifacts dealing with UFOs and other kinds of paraphernalia had rock forming around them, so they had been basically an alien junkyard in shallow seas for probably the better part of 10,000 years. So they'd been around. That you might call an old alien base. Dulce, New Mexico is another old alien base. The aliens have probably been here the better part of at least 500,000 and maybe as much as several million years, although I have artifacts here which show.
And Native Americans have this tradition. The Tibetans may have the most extensive tradition of this, for all I know. South America traditional tribes have this as well. So that by itself is interesting, and you might ask, why do all of these disparate civilizations have these types of ideas? And I don't have the answer to that, but I can tell that's an old idea.
And then, I guess, in terms of military engineering, the Rock of Gibraltar was tunneled out centuries ago by the British. And even going back further than that, the ancient Egyptians did a lot of tunneling thousands of years ago in Egypt. So the provenance of underground tunneling for a wide variety of purposes goes way back in human history.
Lies Cappadocia in central Turkey. Here, wind and water have sculpted strange shapes out of the soft volcanic rock. Rock which ancient peoples once turned into small primitive dwellings. In more recent years, the site has seen the construction of more modern structures. But in 1963, a simple home renovation in the town of Derinkuyu led to an extraordinary discovery when a cave wall was opened, revealing a passageway to an underground city thousands of years old and more than 280 feet deep.
I've been there on multiple occasions, and it's incredible because there's 13 stories that go deep into the ground with ventilation shafts and 15,000 little shafts that bring air to even the deepest of levels.
Incredibly, the number of rock rooms that were found could hold over 20,000 men, women, and children. There was even evidence of religious centers, storerooms, wine presses, and stables for livestock.
Oh, Derinkuyu would have been a massive undertaking for anyone, even in modern times, with modern equipment. But in those days, it would have been stupendous, equal to the pyramids. At Derinkuyu, because of the softness of the stone, you had to be very careful that you provided enough pillar strength to support the floors above. Otherwise, you'd have catastrophic cave-ins. Surprisingly, there's no evidence of any catastrophic cave-ins, so they were apparently extremely clever and knew their material. We're talking deep antiquity. It is mind-boggling to understand how they could have done this. Perhaps they had help from some other civilization.
But just who built this massive underground city? And what mysterious force drove them to live underground?
Why would people want to live deep underground in these weird caverns like that? It seems kind of scary.
But what you really get is in the 20th century, where the Nazis and their predecessors, which was called the Phiil Society, which was a kind of a mystical sect that the Nazis really drew a lot out of in forming their own ideology. The Phiil Society was very interested in Tibetan myths about openings into the earth that describes this idea of deep underground tunnels, bases, crisscrossing the world. And since this was a Tibetan idea, we have to assume that the Nazis themselves were familiar with this idea as well. So the idea in the Tibetan tradition, from what I have understood about it, is that there are different races below the surface of the earth, including reptoid or reptilian races that are supposedly from other worlds. I'm not making this up. This is right out of, in fact, I do recall in the source that I read in the 50s that supposedly came from Tibet, that they believe these reptoid races came from Venus, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, as most people listening know, the surface temperature of Venus is something like 900 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm really dubious about race living there. Nonetheless, this is part of the tradition.
In more modern times, in the early to mid 20th century, you had the French, of course, who constructed the so-called Maginot Line in eastern France to guard against German invasion. Well, the German invasion happened anyway, and the Maginot Line was not a significant military factor in World War II. The Germans themselves during World War II, and also the Japanese, did a huge amount of underground excavation and construction. There was a military civil engineering organization in the Third Reich called the TOT organization, T-O-D-T, and it was named after Fritz Todt. Fritz Todt was a brilliant civil engineer. He was the father of the German Autobahn system. During the World War II period, Adolf Hitler asked Fritz Todt to lend his engineering expertise to the military program of the Third Reich, which he did. He established an engineering agency which was called the Todt Organization. Now, Fritz Todt died in a plane crash in 1942 at the height of World War II. And one of his deputies named Xaver Dorsch, Xaverdorsch, took over control of the agency. And one of the things that Hitler tasked Xaver Dorsch was specifically to embark on an accelerated program of construction of massive deep underground bases for industrial production, for industrial manufacturing in support of the Third Reich's war effort, which he did. However, the war brought an end to that. So after the war, when the Allies, including the Americans, flooded into German-occupied Europe and into Germany itself, they discovered these underground facilities. And the Americans took Xaver Dorsch into detention, and he was actually in American prisoner of war camps for at least a couple of years. The United States Army extensively debriefed Xaver Dorsch. I have a couple of those debriefing documents that he wrote out. I assume that there was a great deal more that I didn't get my hands on and can't, because quite a lot of what happened during and after World War II remains classified to this day. However, I did find a couple of Project Paperclip memos from 1947 that specifically requested Xaver Dorsch by name to be brought to the United States to work on the United States military's underground plant construction program. But he did have a career after World War II. The American military certainly was well aware of who Xaver Dorsch was and his expertise. In his day, he was probably the preeminent authority on underground base construction, whether in Germany or in the United States. And so his services were definitely requested by the United States military after the war, and I suspect that he did come to the United States, but he had a much lower public profile than Werner von Braun, because what the underground base construction program is a very highly secretive and highly secure program that continues to this day. After the war, the United States military embarked on an almost frantic program of deep underground military construction. which continues to this day, and actually my research indicates it continues undersea as well, with underwater bases and tunnels. Lloyd Dushop, the Deputy Director of Engineering and Construction for the United States Army Corps of Engineers, gave a talk at a civil engineering excavation conference at MIT in 1987, where he very plainly spoke about the program of underground construction that the United States military embarked on at the close of World War II. They've never stopped. And in the process of that speech, Dushop said point blank that the United States military has made underground structures, complex, sophisticated underground structures that he cannot discuss publicly, but that are very interesting. So there's no question that the secret underground bases do exist. The United States military has them. Other countries have them as well. And by the way, it's not only the military of the United States or of other countries, who are making these underground and also undersea facilities. Other agencies and organizations do it as well. All that is needed is the requisite will, funding, expert personnel, and technology.
On the southwest part of the Archuleta Mesa, we built an underground facility, a better part of 3 cubic miles hollowed out underground. Then to the southwest of that, we were in the process of the early stages of building. We drilled 4 large tunnel-like holes.
It is possible to create an underground and/or an undersea base virtually anywhere on planet Earth. One of my expert sources told me, when I asked him the same question you just asked me, he said point blank, it's child's play. It's well within the state of the art of modern civil engineering to make a major underground base a mile deep. No problem. That is child's play to make an underground base 1 mile deep. By implication, that suggests it's possible to go even deeper. How much deeper? I don't know, but I've had people tell me that some of the bases are as deep as 10, 12, 14 miles down. I can't prove that. That's what I've been told. But let's just say they can be at least 1 mile deep.
Okay, so if they're 1 mile deep, how would they make that? Like, can you state possibly a piece of technology that you came across in documents you were researching, or? Oh yes. Since at least the 1950s, the mining and civil engineering industries have had the capability to sink major shafts straight down 1, even 2 miles or more, and then to tunnel out from the bottom of the shafts, whether for mining purposes or for other purposes, and create tunnel complexes. Well, the most common form is to use very hard cutting heads on the tunnel boring machines that rotate. It would be like a huge version of the drills used in the petroleum industry and natural gas industry to drill very deep underground boreholes. Only these would be used mostly, not only, but primarily in a horizontal mode, and would have a far larger diameter. But yes, the cutting head would use heads and extremely hard metallic alloys that would cut away the rock and gouge their way through. And then behind the cutting head, there's a system of conveyors that take the crushed rock back behind the machine, and it can be carried away down the tunnel either by conveyors or through a slurry pipe or through narrow gauge railways. All three of these methods are in wide use in the mining industry and underground tunneling industry.
I've heard theories of also nuclear-powered drills.
Yes, I cite this technology in my first book. These are called subterranes, subterrene. Subterranes are nuclear-powered. They use a small fission nuclear reactor. The nuclear reactor is contained within a machine. It heats up a reservoir of lithium into a liquid form. The lithium is a metal, by the way, but it's heated up and it's circulated tubing through the cutting edge or cutting face of this nuclear tunnel boring machine. This is as described in the patents. And this in turn causes the head of the machine to heat up to about 16 or 1700 degrees Fahrenheit, which then liquefies the rock face of the tunnel and into a molten state. And because of the pressure, mechanical pressure of the machine, as it presses forward the tunnel, it displaces this molten rock and plasters it against the side of the tunnel in a molten vitreous form, so that as the machine moves along, it leaves behind this hot, glassy surface that then cools, and you get a glassy, hard rock glass type of surface to the interior of the tunnel. The research and design was done at Los Alamos National Laboratories back in the 20th century. And right about towards the end of the Vietnam War and coming forward, there was an R&D effort, and there were some patents granted to the research team at Los Alamos. If they are in use, they are being used clandestinely in great secrecy.